that. Ooh, there's the magical voice recording in progress. We want that. That's a good thing. And now we're going to try to live stream it on Facebook. And once I do that, I'm turning the phone off. Actually, I think I'm going to turn the phone off now because it looks like it's going to work. So we'll see you all in a couple minutes on the next video, part 2. Ending live broadcast. Okay, so live on Facebook. There it is. Everything seems to be going swimmingly. Continue. We will turn on the TV set in a minute, and then people will be, this is very good now. Very good. Okay. Sharing your own timeline. No. Share to a page. I'm just narrating so nobody's bored by the process. St. John's Church. Go live. Well, wouldn't this be wonderful if it actually worked? Yeah, see, this is what it's telling us. It's saying this video will be deleted after 30 days. So everything is going to be deleted after 30 days now. So we're going to start using our YouTube channel. Okay. This is good. We'll go back to my friend Zoom.
Millions and millions and millions of videos on, so I guess they do have to find.
Yeah, and when we have a YouTube channel, and I was explaining, so I can explain to all of you because it looks like we're actually, in fact, live, which is, you know, thrilling in a weird way. But it's actually working. Oh, let Dennis in. I see Dennis needs to get, I don't see you. Oh, see, so we may have, so everybody needs to know this. We may be having some internet problems throughout this broadcast. Hang on to the Zoom. The Zoom doesn't close just because the internet stops, and we can usually reconnect with Zoom. Facebook people, I really have no advice for you. Sorry. I'd love to be. Okay, does say we're live. This is good. Okay. The 12 o'clock service is both the 7 a.m. and the 12 o'clock are short. They are short because I know that people need to get places and there's no music or anything. And if you feel that you need to leave like after receiving ashes, we understand that. So especially when you have to take care of kids, we totally understand that. But there is communion with the service for those who want to stay for the service and receive communion as well. Oh, good. Connecting into the TV. Ooh, these little hand warmers. We had them out at the prayer table. They're so great. Good morning, Dennis. Good morning, Nora. Good morning, Ed. Good morning, Helen. Good morning, Alistair, but you know, he's actually in the room. Here, I'll do that.
Good morning, Mother.
Good morning, Dennis. Okay, I got it.
Good morning, all.
Okay, here we go. We're still like getting our technology gear because our technology has not been cooperating. The signal looks fine now, though. That's good. All right, so hopefully we're going to put y'all on TV in a minute, and I'm supposedly recording. So does it tell? Yeah, it says it's recording, so this is good. The reason that I want to know if we're recording is because I need to record Church 101 starting tonight, because there are people who are going to miss some of those classes. And if they miss those classes, they'll be able to go back and watch. I'll be able to send a link to the Zoom video. Good I am with tech.
Right.
Okay, and they record it again automatically. So this may happen a couple of times, everybody, that you seem to lose us and we come back. I don't know what the dealio is with, we're okay, Alistair. I'm gonna hang with this because it seems to start itself up again. And it says it's on Facebook too. So this is good. So this is only the third time it's happened in 10 minutes. So it's gonna be a long morning, but a good one. So Zoom people, if you lose us, we'll come back. Just hang. It may seem like we've frozen, but it reboots itself once it connects with the signal again. But we just don't seem to have a reliable internet signal for some reason. And so once again, good morning, Helen, Nora, Dennis, Ed. Alistair is disconnected, so you're not going to see the room this morning. I'm not doing the hotspot. We're connected. I'm just going to stay with what's working for this moment, and then we will make decisions after that. Because then I have to restart the whole meeting, whereas this restarts itself. Okay. So the collect that we're going to say this morning, do you have a prayer book over there, Alistair? Because I really want to say the collect for Good Friday. It's such a beautiful collect. Would you mind getting, thank you. It's not that I'm telling him what to do. It's just that he's moving and I'm sitting, and it makes more sense. Why, thank you. Actually, why don't you read the collect? And you're going to need to scooch. Here we are.
So this isn't the collect of Good Friday.
What is it? Oh, sure. I'm sorry. You put the opening collect in there. Thank you. Would you like to read it?
Yeah. Okay, let us pray. Almighty God, whose most dear Son went up not to joy, but first he suffered pain and entered into glory.
Entered not into glory.
Not into glory before he was crucified. Mercifully grant that we, walking in the way of the cross, may find it none other than the way of life and peace, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. I have more of them. I have a bunch of them right here. Jan, just so you know, I do send them by email several times a week. So I know that you don't
gave
get,
John the other one last week,
I gave you the wrong one last week because we just did not like that study. So we changed, here you go.
but it's pretty similar.
Yeah,
Well, then.
yeah. It wasn't gonna be, we knew it wasn't gonna be a good study. Actually, it's partly because we knew who we were working with. Oh, Micah, be nice to give you one too, wouldn't it? Does anybody else, we have printouts if anybody wants one. Other than you people on Zoom who. Good morning, Lydia, Mayor, Imelda, Ronnie, and Jan. We're glad to have all of you with us here studying today as well. I will send these out by email. I will send this one out. The next one that we're studying, I will send it out tonight or tomorrow so that you have it. You should get it. Thank you for mentioning that I didn't attach it. The classic, problem here.
Waiting because Joan says, no, she said she sent it. And I go, it's not there. I looked at my junk mail.
Nobody else told me, so thank you. I had no idea. I was like, oh, I sent it out on Friday of last week, and I was like, they've had plenty of time to work with it.
I know on Sunday you said you had sent it out, and I thought, well, maybe something happened there. So then
Nope.
I asked her, every day we ask each other, did you get it yet?
So I'm seeing Larry and Mary Jane and anybody else who is on the Bible study. If I don't have your email, then I can't send you the information about the Bible study. So I want to make sure that I have your email addresses. Don't put them on this comment. Contact the church or send a message through Facebook to find out. I mean, I'll happily, you know what I will do? I mean, I don't care. This is how this works. I'll put my email in there. If you want to be added to our Bible study list so that you get these printouts before the study, I'm going to put my email in there. And you can happily email me to let me know you want to be on the Bible study list. And then you will get the printouts. Okay, that is done. Okay, so this is yours.
Thank you.
So the 7 last words. What are the 7 last words of Jesus? And why would we bother studying them?
That's
No,
the
I'm
word.
asking you. I'm asking you as the teacher. I'm asking you, man. Right to your face. Why would we?
There are 7 phrases.
Phrases. They really are phrases.
Got that one right.
I know, because I kept going through and counting all of them. I couldn't find any that had 7 letters.
That's very funny. Yeah, I was confused by that one because they call them the 7 last words. I'm like, there's many more than 7 words here. Yes, good point. Okay, 7 phrases.
7 phrases that Jesus said or recorded as being said from the cross
Right,
in the Gospels.
right.
So it's a classic.
It is a classic study. It's a
Yeah.
classic Lenten study, but actually what a lot of churches do is on Good Friday from 12 to 3, they have 3 hours of meditation on just these 7 phrases. And a lot of times they'll bring in additional ministers and they will each take one of the phrases, and there will be 7 different ministers, or they will switch off in order to have 3 hours of reflection. Now, why would we do that from 12 to 3 on Good Friday? That's not you, Dan. That's when we believe when he was crucified, he would have died at 3, we believe at 3 p.m. So you honor those 3 hours by
I'm sitting here thinking how long 3 hours are, and imagine how long 3 hours were.
I actually think that he was actually hung in the morning from the cross, I believe. So I don't know. I think that 3 hours is sort of sacred time for us that we've determined, but I actually think he was on the cross from about 9 in the morning. Yeah. It's a terrible, as many of you know, it's a terrible way to die. You actually suffocate. That's how you die on the cross. You don't die from loss of blood. You die from suffocation, because you have to be able to have the ability to move, to bring your diaphragm up to breathe. And when you're hanging from something, you can't do that. You're not able to do that. You have to lift yourself up every time you take a breath. And there's a point at which you can no longer lift yourself up to get a breath. And I'm not saying that to freak anybody out. I'm just letting you know how. And that's why at the same time, they wanted to make sure that all of the people, that's why they break the legs. Remember in the cross when they say break the legs of the other ones if they're not dead yet? That way they can't lift themselves up anymore. Right. Then they're just going to suffocate. So it is a terrifically inhuman way to die, obviously, as well as a public spectacle of death. There's nothing dignified about it. There's nothing, it's a spectacle, like many punishments were, hangings, public hangings and things like that. So I don't mean to freak anybody out, and I apologize if that's the result we're having. But it gives us time during Lent. And my friend Helen knows this. I love Lent. I don't think of Lent as a terribly sad time, because we know the end of the story and we know about salvation and we know about resurrection. But I do think it's worth meditating on so that we understand just what you were saying, Barbara, that the sacrifice was incredible and the suffering was incredible. And so on this final journey that Jesus, they talk about it as, this is what the name of the movie was, The Passion of the Christ. And we think of passion as, woo, I'm so in love, I don't know what. And that's part of it, really, because Jesus was so in love with us that he was willing to do this thing. But passion means suffering. And actually, when you love somebody so much, sometimes there are people who suffer in love. Like when your love is unrequited, you know, your passion is painful to you. So the word passion actually means suffering. So when we hear about the Passion of Christ or Passion Week, Holy Week is sometimes called Passion Week. It's about the suffering of Jesus that we walk with throughout the course of that final week of Lent. And just for those of you who may want them, Kelly brought these over. If you didn't get one on Sunday, we have these very handy dandy booklets that tell you everything about every single holy day of Lent and when it will be celebrated in St. John's Church, including the entire schedule for Holy Week. There are actually a couple of other things that are added in here, but most of the things, including Stations of the Cross every Friday night at 6:30. Stations of the Cross is a pilgrimage. I can't go to Jerusalem. You can't go to Jerusalem. So we can't walk the way of the cross that Jesus walked, but we walk it in the church. And I have to get those upstairs. Can you remember to remind me? The stations are upstairs in a box. And I need to get those down. Because somebody was asking me, well, how do you do the stations? I don't see any stations. Oh, they're upstairs in a box. So if you want one of these booklets, they can be emailed to you if you can't get here, but they will be available. Oh, yes, they will be available. And I've got tons of them, obviously. They will be available throughout the season of Lent. But if this is something that you would like to have or take a look at, let us know and we'll make sure you get one. Or we can mail you a physical copy if for some reason getting it online is not useful.
So,
Yeah.
do you want to read Jesus' words?
Unbelievable. What did I just do with my? Well, I would if I had my.
Has anybody got?
Did I give away? Did anybody have writing on theirs? Oh, there you go.
No, it doesn't.
No. Oh, no. Blue writing. What I just had it. We all just saw it. See, this is not just me. Okay.
Is it in your bag? Did it disappear?
No, it didn't. It was right here. It was sitting on the computer.
Underneath those papers?
Maybe it is. Let's just take a look before we get all silly. Yes, it is. I can see that it is because it's got bendy pages. We're good. We're good to go. Good morning, Ida. Ronnie, I thought you were on the list. I thought you got emails. If for some reason you aren't on the list, I will contact you to let you know. But keep letting us know if you want to be on the Bible study list. The minute you want to get off it, we'll take you off it. Just tell us. We're not like some weird telemarketer. Although, telemarketing for Jesus is not the worst thing. Okay.
Can you read the words, please?
Very, very short phrase, very powerful phrase. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Oh, I meant that bit, sorry.
Oh, when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So you can tell these are two different translations. The top says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And this one says, Father, forgive them, they do not know what they are doing. So this is a more colloquial translation that's easier for us to understand. So he is dying on the cross. He is just speaking out. He's not speaking, he's speaking to God. The audience for that is God, but he's saying that so that everybody can hear him. And so I just want to, do you think everybody thinks they need to be forgiven? That's watching this happen.
No,
No,
they
exactly.
don't.
No, they don't. They're like, what is he talking about? Forgive who? Like they have no idea. This is about them. What they believe has happened is something that is just and right. So he's sort of pardoning them before they even have an idea. And this sounds familiar in some of our contemporary political culture. Pardoning them before anybody even brings up quote unquote charges against them. Isn't that amazing? Before they're even aware that they need to be forgiven.
Yeah, my note says that it's pardonable ignorance. He's forgiving their ignorance.
He's forgiving their ignorance. That's really, I think that's a great phrase. Jesus is forgiving them their ignorance. Yeah.
Is there a thing in the confession that maybe in Rite 1 gives for the things that we have done and the things we have not
Oh,
done?
no, that's oh, I love that. It's in the confession.
Yes.
I love that. And I think people get all kind of freaky about that because they're thinking like, why do I need to be forgiven for things or the things that we don't even know that we've done?
The sins of omission.
Yeah, do you have, did you bring the prayer book? Let me just see that because that's actually very important, I think. I love the prayer of confession for that reason, but I think it can be concerning to people because of some of the phraseology in it. We confess that we've sinned against you in thought, word, and deed. I love that we've included thought, by what we have done and by what we have left undone. We have not loved you with our whole heart. We have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. We are truly sorry and we humbly repent. So, yeah, for the things that we have done and the things we've left undone. And I think for the things we don't even know that are undone, because I think the things that are undone are probably things we didn't even know we needed to do.
So whenever we looked at these questions, we thought this is more to do with our emotions rather than getting into a deep Bible study. We do get to
We
looking
will,
at the
yeah.
Bible studies, but question 1 says, what images or thoughts come to mind when you hear the verses above?
And your question was?
Oh, no, I'm just throwing out the question.
No, but you asked me when we were talking about, you said, what movies, like when we talk about images, are there movies that come to mind? What movies come to mind?
Only the Passion of Christ.
Right? Some of the like no kidding around Jesus movies. How many people have watched The Passion of the Christ? Big sigh on the right-hand side. Why did you sigh like that?
Oh, it's just horrible.
It was
It's
horrible. Yeah.
It was a very difficult movie to watch.
Mhm. It was difficult. I would never watch it again.
Mm-mm.
There are times when I feel like I need to do things like that because I need to, as a minister, I need to make sure I see what people are seeing, especially in contemporary culture. And we were talking about it the other day at Bible study, and there are images from that movie that I will never shake. The image of Satan was very pervasive to me, and I can describe that still. I guess it was effective. But so clearly some of those movies, but are there other images or thoughts that come to mind? Now with specifically the verses, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. How about that phrase? Does that bring anything else to mind, or is anything that gets stirred up? Did you write something down?
Movies.
I wrote impossibility. So for me, the fact that he's hanging on the cross and he's able to say those words, it just seems impossible. I mean, we talk about forgiveness a lot in church.
Well, I think it's
Can you?
because even before he was crucified, he was brutally beaten.
Yes,
So after he was beaten, he's extremely, I would assume extremely weak. And
Yeah.
he was crucified, and to still be able to utter those words and truly feel that,
right. While he's still in the middle of it.
yes.
He's not even like past it. He's not even resurrected and saying, Father, forgive them, because look, everything turned out okay.
Yeah,
But in the middle of that,
especially when I think before that, when he was in the garden praying, take this from me if.
Yes.
So, I mean, it wasn't like, well, I know this is gonna happen and, it's like
right,
the whole thing.
right. And I can deal with it. It's okay. I mean, but he also, the other thing for me is that Jesus is so other centered. Like, why at that point is he not saying, God, stop this, like make this pain go away? Doesn't that seem like a pretty good prayer at that point? Like a sensible prayer? If you've ever been in incredible pain, are you praying for the nurses and doctors around you, or are you praying to get rid of your pain? Most of us, yeah, are praying to get rid of our pain, and which is okay. That's not a criticism. It's just that we tend to be very self-focused at those moments, understandably. Very few of us are praying for other people while we're experiencing that type of surpassing suffering.
When I think of this, I think the human side of Jesus feels this pain. It had to be an incredible pain, but the godlike side of Jesus,
Mhm.
he was still praying for people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really
So
interesting.
you see both sides.
That's really, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say that. Have you? See,
No.
this is what I love about Bible study. That is a brand new thought, my friend. Because I think most people say he is absolutely, we see his humanity only. I think that's what most people say about the cross. Like we certainly see divinity in the resurrection, but that is a brand new thought that we actually are seeing God speaking when he's able to talk about forgiveness in the middle of the most stark human suffering. Well,
I'm not so
Well, I
sure.
had-
oh, okay. Oh,
I-
Alistair's going to dissent. Alistair's going to dissent.
I'm not so sure that we can actually divide his humanity from his divinity in this moment.
I know what
think-
you're saying.
I think
That this is called a heresy when we do
because-
that. So
because-
he's
Well, it's that they both existed.
coexisting at the same time, but we're seeing them.
so you can look at it from two different angles. Maybe what you're saying, you can see it two different angles, but we will be coming across other phrases that Jesus said on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? How do we look at that one? Is
Each
that-
individual
know.
phrase has its own integrity. So,
Yes,
so
but I'm
we-
just
yeah.
saying, is that the human part of Jesus crying out, God, part, why have you left me?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't want to go that far. There is something.
Well, okay, we're not on
Yeah,
that
no,
phrase.
no,
Can we
no,
wait
no.
till that
So we
phrase?
can't
Can we
wait to
stick
get
with
to
this
that
one?
one. Can't
Yeah,
wait to get to
clearly
that one.
Alistair is a little fixated on that phrase. So when we get there, he'll be leading the
No, I
study.
just mention it because it's tying up with this phrase. I'm
Yeah.
not fixated on it. But I think you can look at it that way, but I find it difficult to separate the humanity from the divinity because
It's called a
gets us-
heresy.
It gets us
Yeah.
into difficult waters.
So it means that it means not right belief. And there's something called modalism, where we separate Jesus into his parts instead of trying to see him as a unified whole. And that's very challenging for us because that's we're human and it's
Yeah.
hard not to do that.
Yeah.
But the sort of the work of being a Christian is to try to understand the wholeness of Jesus all the time as being constantly present, both the divine and, but I'm still with you. I think that's really fascinating. I just never heard anybody say that. See, this is why I come to Bible study, just so you know. So you did a lot of study on that.
I did, at the Lutheran Church, I did something similar to this.
Mhm.
And this was the phrase that I was given. and so I did a lot
Oh,
of reading on it.
yeah. Good timing.
Yeah.
Good timing.
That's sort of like cheating, right?
Ouch.
Only your sister.
I was
can
going to say
that.
only sisters can say those things to each other.
So the
We just sit
second-
back and smile.
The second question is, what feelings do you have when you consider that the Son of God was crucified with criminals, although he had committed no crime? Do you have any feelings?
Jesus spent a lot of time with criminals. He spent a lot of time with everybody. So I think that was God's
That's what I said.
doing. It's like, he's a man of the people.
Right.
Were you looking at your sheet notes as well?
No, I didn't.
Was that your phrase also?
Probably.
Well done. That's what we had. He was always associated with criminals.
He
The least-
chose, yeah.
Yeah, they tax collectors and publicans are the
Yeah.
the sinners.
I have my
Yeah.
sweater, it's freezing.
And in the eyes of the Pharisees at that time, he was a criminal.
That is correct.
Yes, because he
It
had
was no different
blasphemed.
for them.
On Sunday and, oh, yeah.
Well,
had-
and what does a special
Naughty.
crucifixion look like? I mean, crucifixion is crucifixion. What I mean is, whether he had criminals on either side of him or not, this is a terrible, horrible thing to witness and a terrible, horrible way to die. So I understand the idea that, you know, it might be offensive to think that he was crucified with criminals, but part of what Jesus did was enter into this world to say, I am just as you are. I am with you as you are. And certainly, as you were saying, I mean, he ate with tax collectors and quote unquote sinners of all sorts and the unclean. So this should not be surprising to us. I don't think it was surprising to him. And in some ways, it normalizes for us the I'm not going to say the process, the punishment of crucifixion, because clearly it wasn't just like Jesus didn't get a special punishment.
Right.
This is what they did to criminals in general to punish them publicly, which just sounds horrific. I'm sorry, I'm gonna put my sweater on.
It's interesting that the question has a presumption.
Ooh, what is the presumption?
Although he had committed no crime, we have just talked about the Pharisees believed he had committed a crime. The Romans couldn't find anything wrong with him.
No.
The Romans then decided, well, who do you want? Do you want Barabbas to set free or do you want Jesus set free? And they chose Barabbas. So their way of doing it was, yeah, let's keep the peace. If Jesus lives, there's going to be more trouble.
Mhm.
But the assumption here is made, although he had committed no crime. That's looking with Jesus colored glasses back at this.
How do we not look at this with Jesus colored glasses?
But also it's the Pharisees had decided that Jesus had committed the ultimate crime of declaring that he was the Son of God, that he was the Messiah. For them, that was blasphemy and was deserving of death.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have the authority to declare the death
Okay.
penalty. on
That, I was
someone.
gonna say, slow down and say this, because I don't think anybody, this is good information for people.
The Pharisees did not have the authority to declare a death sentence on someone. That's why they had to go to the Romans. Only they could
Right.
punish someone by death.
Right.
Did
Only-
they actually think he committed a crime, or were some of them
The
more
Pharisees?
threatened by him?
Both, but ultimately it was he had declared himself to be the Son of God, the Messiah, and that for them was blasphemous.
But yet the other criminal that we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So,
So even he was a believer.
right. Right, which is, I find that this is one of my, and it's a weird way to put it. It's one of my favorite passages, that particular part that you just read, Mary Lou, because I find it to be so powerful that he was willing to stand up for Jesus in the middle of his own terrible death, to speak out on behalf of Jesus. And then Jesus, of course, and will come up one of these weeks. Today you will be with me in paradise.
Yeah.
That to me, I don't think it gets any better than that. I think that phrase, this phrase of forgiveness is very, very powerful, but that particular part of the crucifixion story is really, it stands out for me, that in the middle of all of this, somebody's declaring faith in Jesus. You know, you just picture people like just chatting with each other on the crosses, you know? They were incredible pain. Like this isn't, it was every word that they spoke was at a price, and that was difficult to so it's not like they were just like saying, so, you know, the weather's not bad. At least it's not raining, you know, or whatever. Do you know, I mean, like this was all said in the midst of incredible suffering, and we have to keep funneling it through that lens as well. So what I had said was, and it's interesting because it does ask for your feelings. I mean, I don't really have feelings about this, and that's one of my arguments in some ways with this particular question. What I said was just that they're Jesus's peeps. These are the people that Jesus always chose to be with. And of course, Jesus was crucified with them at the very end,
I'm not necessarily sure why I kept question 3 in.
because it's kind of like question 2.
It's kind of like question 1 as well.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that strikes you about the image in this scene?
Or as you studied, did anything else come to life? Did you have a deeper understanding of something? Did something shock you? Did something stand out? Because we're so used to this series of events that we know in a series of, we know, as I said, we're just so used to the story. But when we start to isolate these things, I mean, what is it? And we're going to get to this, but how hard is forgiveness in our culture? What has it felt like, in our lives, and what would it mean to us? I mean, forgiveness is hard when all the conditions are right. Imagine when everything is wrong and you're considered wrong too. And so they've punished you, like they have to forgive you for something, and you're calling out to say, forgive them before they even know what they did. Crazy stuff.
In what ways was it costly for Jesus to say, Father, forgive them? Physically?
Yeah. Physically.
As you said, just speaking.
Right. Speaking itself was such hard work.
And he had to set aside his own pain.
Yeah.
To say it.
He had to set aside, I'm repeating in case people can't hear, he had to set aside his own pain so that people could hear what it was that he believed he needed to say.
I also think
If you can like be the
he could
camera.
have said this in his mind, he could have been thinking this.
Right. Right.
I think he said it out loud so that people could hear him say that and realize that he was saying, forgive them.
That's a really good point, because, we've said before, even when you're saying your prayers yourself, God hears them, but he was doing something very specific in choosing to say those words out loud. It's a really good point.
So in the Nook,
Oh, the Nook was not a good
We,
place
uh,
yesterday.
we had a question of who was hearing the words that Jesus spoke.
So that's one. So how was it costly for Jesus? Well, who was listening to him say this?
Yeah, who was listening? Obviously the executioners, the
Okay,
Roman
you
soldiers.
asked the question, then you answered it.
I know, but those are the obvious
Pep, pep,
ones.
pep, pep.
The obvious.
Let the people answer.
Also, there were some
Yep.
of his followers.
The
there.
Romans, some of his followers. See, there, it's a little more. Some of his followers were there.
And were some of the Pharisees there themselves?
Sure, I'm sure they were. I'm sure they were.
Romans were there?
Yeah. I mean, there were children there. This was a public spectacle. They had concession stands. They were selling popcorn. I mean, we really need to get the picture of what the scene is like. This was a big event for people. Because,
Going to the movies.
wise words from the couch, like going to the movies. This was specifically put on not just as a warning to people, but as entertainment. And when we went to the Colosseum, they talked about, how the Colosseum would be packed full of people, just waiting for people to be torn up in front of them. The bloodlust of that, and some people had special seating so they could see better, and some people had special shading so that the sun didn't bother them too much while they watched somebody getting torn apart.
Well, even
Now,
here,
my-
as late as the 1800s, hangings were public.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they were warnings.
People gathered to watch them.
Yeah, they were warnings. They were warnings. Yeah. And they would, after having done a little reading, they would put them off, like people would bring picnic lunches and stuff. And then they would kind of put it off to kind of build the anticipation. Yeah, horrific stuff. I mean, I have to ask though, this is, how many of our contemporary movies feature extraordinary violence that we're willing to pay money to watch?
Ah,
I mean, I'm not I can't watch them, so I'm a little bit on the biased side on this one. But somebody asked us if we watched the movie Gladiator. In 100 years, I'm not going to watch the movie Gladiator. because that is not good for me. But
But we're always told that the animals were hurt during the making of this movie.
at the end, yeah.
It doesn't say humans, but usually it says
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah. But that is, I mean, we have to also understand where is our own, I happen to think, this is not what Alistair thinks. I happen to think that boxing, we should not be watching boxing. We should not be watching, like, there's something for me that's really, you know, you can call it a sport and they've trained. Well, for heaven's sakes, like, I don't know, punch a tree or something. I don't know about this business of making each other, like when Katie Grady just fell and she was bleeding, to me, this is horrific that a human being has been hurt. And so we allow people to go into a ring and duke it out and we pay? Like, let's not lose sight. Or what is the one, cage wrestling or cage fighting? Like there's a lot of stuff going on or that people are watching. And look, I don't watch it. I'm not, it's just that we have to understand that when we think this is terrible, this still happens and we still pay money for it and we
I always
still eat
pictured it as
popcorn.
Everybody was afraid to be there and because they didn't know if they would be chosen. You know,
Mhm.
I didn't picture people there celebrating at all. It was like fearful, sad, seeing people that they knew up
Mm-mm.
on it. I didn't
Mm-mm.
picture it as a party.
Mm-mm. No, this was public sport. This was a version of, you know, of cage fighting or something, you know, that people would, except that I don't tend to think people paid to go. I think it was
Yeah.
public, but
Well, it's
Okay.
also
Yeah,
not
that's true.
voluntary. People are voluntarily there.
Yes.
For boxing and things. I
yes,
don't think people are volunteering.
that is
to
true.
be-
I don't think you train for crucifixion. Yes, yes,
Would you say people said, hey, they're crucifying 3 people up there today, let's go watch?
yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes, I
yeah.
think that is exactly what happened.
looky-loos that go when there's a terrible accident.
There you go.
Right?
What
It's
hap-
like, let's go see it.
Well, and even in the traffic actually on the other side is slow because we're all too busy trying to get a look at what's going on over there.
Yeah.
We do have a natural predilection towards, you know, looking at the bad news.
Well, they had the guards down below that were splitting up his clothes.
Yep.
And betting on them and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even the guards were kind of treating it like kind of a game. Okay, throw the dice and see who gets what, who gets his stuff. You know, and all of, and here's the thing that we really do not like knowing, and I'm going to say it anyhow. We have all these wonderful crucifixes in churches and other places. Jesus was naked. We don't depict that, and that's fine with me that we
Right.
don't. I think it's, you know, I think that's fine, but he was complete. All the dignity that they had was stolen from them, from all 3 of the men who were up there, and from anyone who was crucified. You were crucified with nothing in order to make sure that the spectacle was even greater, that there was no dignity that was afforded to you.
Right, and when you died, and this is disgusting to mention, but your bowels and bladder let go too.
Yeah, I mean, there's terrible stuff, right? Yeah, it's, yeah, we're certainly not just trying to go over it, but in any case, so was it costly for Jesus to say, Father, forgive them? I think it was incredibly costly, except for the fact that Jesus knew who he was talking to and he knew what he was saying. So maybe I see it as costly, but he saw it as the reason he came. That's the reason he came, so that we could hear those words.
The other way it's costly is that he could have done something else. He could have taken himself off the cross.
Yeah, he could have.
So to stay there was costly.
And people say, you know, if you are the Son of God, get yourself off that cross, and he doesn't. And I remember somebody very powerfully saying, you know, Jesus chose the cross.
Yeah.
He's the only person who could have gotten himself off without any trouble.
It was Paul.
Well, there was a particular reflection that I heard from
Okay.
someone, so I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on what someone
Okay.
else said another time.
Yeah.
So, costly, yes, but essential. This is why he came. Those words are incredibly powerful for us to hear. And, you know, and I know we don't like thinking about this, I'm sure. I mean, I don't. But those words resonate for me in my own broken life, that if Jesus is able to forgive people who have done this to him, then I think Jesus can forgive me. Like, it gives me hope for myself. I'm no better than people in the crowd. I just didn't happen to be there. I don't know how I would have behaved. I don't know if I would have been one of the people who said crucify him. Like, I'm also not smug about these things because we tend to act in a group. We tend to act in a group, and what your group tells you, you do. You want to be with that group and you think, well, they must know. They must know. And we see that in politics. We've seen a lot of changes in our political climate, and a lot of it has to do with, I feel, and I may be wrong, with people sort of saying, oh, this is the direction my group is going in. I'm going to stay with my group. And I think at great cost. And I don't know that I wouldn't have been one of the people in the group saying, crucify him. I can't tell you that that wouldn't have been me. I don't know. So this idea of hearing Jesus say this is certainly very powerful to me to reflect on again and again. And then I also think, and you know, because we've been able to dig into these words, if that's what Jesus can do, what can I do? We think that people are impossible to forgive. We think, I certainly couldn't do that. They did ... Well, I can't forgive. I can't understand. I can't. Jesus forgave everybody in that crowd. He didn't say, I forgive the 3 people in the corner that said this, or I forgive the Pharisees, that particular group. He said, Father, forgive them. Everybody who heard that day could hear those words. What can I do myself?
So what does it mean they do not know what they do?
Things done and left undone, my friend. Don't,
No,
what do you
no,
think?
no,
What?
they do not
didn't
know.
that he was the savior.
Yes.
Right?
They didn't
They
know.
were ignorant that he really was the Messiah.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. You know, and they were acting on information that they had received from other people as well, like from their group people, from the Pharisees, who were the people who taught the people, who knew the rules, who knew the laws. They didn't necessarily have a reason to distrust them. So it's hard for us to know who is good authority in our world. Who do we listen to? Who do you listen to make decisions about what you believe in?
Well, it was very quickly that the people who met him on Palm Sunday celebrated his bringing out, you know, the king had arrived,
Yes.
and by the end of the week, they were shouting, crucify him.
Same group of people. Same group of people.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's the same group of people? Why couldn't they have been hiding in their homes or something and then just the people who supported the Pharisees be out there?
So Barbara's asking, why wouldn't it be just people who supported the Pharisees? I think it was a very diverse crowd at the crucifixion, because I think crucifixion was sport. So, but certainly some of the same people. I mean, because the crowd on Palm Sunday seemed to indicate, no, this really is the guy. You know, crowds and crowds and crowds of people throwing down their cloaks and palms so that the donkey's feet didn't have to touch the ground, kind of thing. The message went out in some way or another that, you know, no, this man that we thought is really not. And certainly some people could have gone there and thought, no, I thought he, like, maybe they were confused. I mean, there was no group think. I mean, there was, but there certainly were people who were confused by what was happening. There were people who certainly were believers in the crowd who were like, nope, this is not the right thing to do. And I want to be here to witness how terrible humankind can be to itself. So there were a range of people in that crowd, I would think.
Don't
Not-
you think that, because, I mean, we always think of the Pharisees not kind of as the bad people, but they were very, very respected people. in the
Yes, they
Jewish
were.
community. So, okay, I'm kind of believing this is the Messiah, but then I start listening to the Pharisees. and
Exactly.
Change your mind.
Right.
I mean, so you could have been, yes, here comes the king, and then the next thing, crucify him.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Right. And so likelihood was that the Pharisees were not among the crowd who were saying Hosanna. The likelihood is that it was sort of the average people who were out there doing that. And when the Pharisees saw that kind of power being, and remember, this is also a public trial that Jesus was speaking to Pilate, that he was paraded in front of the people. Who do you want us to release? They got to speak and to say. So, and so they would know that this crucifixion was coming and that they had spoken for it. So they had a vested interest in seeing this happen.
I think that the Pharisees, seeing how popular he was,
Yep.
could feel some of their power slipping away
Oh,
and
absolutely.
felt that they had to change this. You know, they had to keep the power. I mean, it's all about power, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and that's,
even today, it's all about power.
well, it is, and it is for most of us as well. We like to have our own, what I would call personal agency, which equates to a certain amount of power. We want to be able to make decisions about what we do, where we go, what we believe in, what TV we watch, what food we eat. And that doesn't sound like power over someone else, but we like to have a measure of power in the world. Power is very attractive because it gives us the ability. Good morning, Leslie. It gives us the ability to make decisions for ourselves. And when we start to actually become a person who can influence other people, that can become very attractive.
And yet, if you think about the Amish, who forgiveness is a very big tenet of
Yes, it
theirs.
is.
If somebody does something against them, they don't press charges. And when that young man
Yeah,
went in and killed those children at their school, they forgave him. They actually went to his parents and brought casseroles and.
yes, they did.
How can you do that when somebody has just killed your little child?
Right,
I'd wanna like, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
correct, right,
yeah.
right.
I
And
can
that's
think of several tortures in my mind.
right, right.
I'm not sitting beside you anymore.
Yeah, it must be the hair on it coming out.
That at trials that are televised, you know, like when there's a local,
Mhm.
did something terrible. Sometimes the parents will say at the trial,
Mm.
after they've been, that we forgive you.
Yeah, and that's
And it-
amazing.
It makes you think, personally, could you do that?
Yeah.
Did you bring the thing? Did you bring the information about?
Um,
We actually have, because both of us thought of different stories about exceptional forgiveness that.
I think
almost-
it may come up later on.
It's gonna come up in the
Yeah,
next question.
I
really.
think also we need to realize or think how the Romans were looking at this. Jesus coming in proclaimed as the king
Of the Jews.
of the Jews. The Romans were all about peace. So they said they didn't want a disturbance. The last thing they wanted
Right.
was an uprising in Judea.
Right.
That would take away a lot of troops from somewhere else that they were dealing with something. So they just did not want to have this to happen. And so it could be that they were putting out the message,
Sure.
if you follow this guy, you'll end up like the others who followed so-called messiahs. You'll end up dead too.
Right.
So there was a threat from I would say there's an unveiled threat from them because the Romans were very quick to put down any sort of disturbance within.
You see that in The Chosen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, back to The Chosen that we don't really watch. But I remember when Matthew was going to leave his life to follow Jesus, and the Roman soldier who was his guard, who seemed to really kind of like him and was trying to look out for him, was saying, you know, if you follow that guy, your life is going to be awful. Like, do you know what you're doing? Like, go back to your house, you know, go back to your robes, go back to your 45 pairs of sandals. You know, don't do this. Do you have any idea what's going to happen when you start to follow this guy? And he was working very hard to dissuade Matthew from following Jesus, because he said, you know, this isn't going to turn out well. He knew that there was going to be a controversy or a confrontation and a conflict that most likely wasn't going to end up working out for Jesus.
Do you want to read question 5?
Question 5, and I have a lot of notes on this one. In what ways does it feel costly to you when you forgive someone who has wronged you? So I'm going to start there. And what was interesting about last night, we were like, well, when have I, and I don't know if you were able to think of something, when have I ever really forgiven someone? Really forgiven someone? Do you ever really recall specifically saying the words, I forgive you, to someone else? I mean, it's not common. We think it, we're like, yeah, I'm okay with them now. But do we ever really consciously, or have we ever consciously said, I forgive you? Not even to the person, but just said those words to ourselves. So I'm going to tell them the story about the shirt.
If you want, yes.
So last night, Alistair said, well, yeah, I forgave you. I was like, what? For what? And he said, for ruining my shirt. And I was like, ruining your shirt? So he had a shirt that someone had given him from Northern Ireland that he really loved. And I had, by mistake, put something in the washing machine that snagged the shirt and ruined it. I mean, okay, for me, I hate to say this. First of all, it was a sports shirt too. I don't follow sports. I don't have any. So I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I did not know that there was a deep-seated hurt that had occurred for which I needed to be forget. Like he described the thing that was in the dryer or the washer that ruined the shirt. That's how vivid this was for him. I was like, I don't have any, I'm sorry, I don't have any memory of that. Awkward. But this was clearly a deep wound for Alistair because it connects him to home. It was a special shirt that someone had given him. And I was just treating it like it was just one of his pieces of clothing. And he said, no, I had to forgive you for that. I didn't even know that I needed to be forgiven, nor did I know that he'd forgiven me. Didn't sound really like he'd forgiven me last night. I'm just saying, there's a lot of description going on. That's a small example. So but he was very specific. He knew exactly when he had forgiven someone, and it was me.
Well, forgiving yourself is very hard in many instances or something like that.
I do, but I want to focus on other people because I think that's really, really powerful too. I agree with you about that. I absolutely do. But this idea of have we ever truly, genuinely, can we think of a time when we,
Sometimes I've forgiven so that the family can go on,
ooh, interesting.
because if I didn't, it would cause such a rift, and I didn't want that to happen. And so you
Wow.
swallow your pride, your anger, your
Wow.
whatever you have at that moment, and you make up with them,
Mhm.
and then you have to just go on and get over it. And I would think that's forgiveness when I just get over it.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Is it? Because I wouldn't say I forgive you because that person thought that, you know.
They didn't need to be forgiven.
The
Right.
whole
Right.
thing.
Like me, I didn't think I really
Yeah, yeah.
did anything with the shirt. I don't even know if I said I'm sorry now that I'm like reflecting back on that.
I think we've all had, I mean, I know in my family, I had a brother and we didn't speak for a long time. And then all of a sudden, we never really talked about it, we just got beyond it. Now, I don't know, I guess I didn't say I forgive you, and he probably didn't think he needed forgiving me anyway. Well, we just got beyond it, so was that the same type of thing?
I mean, I
But
think
it's
you,
not like
yeah.
saying, okay, you did something terrible and I hate you for that, but now I forgive you. I don't think many of us actually do that.
we may want to think about that though, because there's power in that. So I actually had a difficult childhood, and I had a very challenging mother who really didn't like me. And I really made a conscious decision, and I remember the decision to forgive her. I didn't like magically love her more after I did that, but I had to let go of her horrible behavior in order for me to become the mother I was supposed to be. And to not keep thinking, oh, I wish I'd had a good mother. I wish, like when I said and I didn't say it to her, she didn't think she was a bad mother. She had 7 kids to take care of. I was just one of like a bunch of mongrels, really. So it was nothing about her receiving that forgiveness. I had to do that, or else I was not going to get past real abuse as a child. And I really have I have nothing left. I have no anger. So I had a sucky mother. So what? I mean, I'm not being mean or anything. I mean, and I really hope that she's in heaven. I don't think that she's been denied heaven's entrance or anything. She had circumstances in her life that created the behaviors that she exhibited. And unfortunately, I was just a good mark. But I had to forgive her, or else I could not parent my own children or talk about her to my own children in a way that was loving, because I thought that she gave birth to me, for heaven's sakes. That wasn't easy by itself. So I think, and we may not say those words specifically, but I think it's useful to hold on to those words, because I think it is important sometimes that we actually do say them. I think they have a lot of power in us, for us, and for other people. Now, here's an excellent question. Good morning, Joyce. It's good to have you, and good morning, Pam. Pam has an excellent question. Is forgiveness really forgiveness if you are burdened and can't forget?
I think you can forgive and not forget the circumstances.
Right. Right.
You haven't forgotten.
No, it's just like you break the letter. You can't erase it. really.
So yeah, this requires therapy.
Mike has something too.
All right, hold on.
I was just gonna say, when it's really hard to forgive, it doesn't seem to happen all at once.
What a good point. We're
So,
talking about it like there's this magic time when we say, I forgive, and woo, it's done.
yeah.
But it's not usually how it works, is it?
So these two need therapy over here. Are you talking about?
I was saying there's a lot. It sounds like sometimes you need a little bit more than just.
Which is exactly what Mike is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point.
Forgiving is not the same as forgetting.
It is never going to be the same as forgetting, because when we forget, then sometimes things get perpetuated. Abuse can get perpetuated. So not forgetting is actually important. When we read history, why do we read history? We read history so that we understand what happened and hopefully not to reenact the challenges and problems and sufferings of the past. Have we learned from what happened? You know? Yeah, and I was an adult when I said, I forgive you to my mother. I wasn't like 4 years old. I wasn't like an early adapter of the forgiveness model. I had no idea what was happening when I was 4. It was really when I was an adult and could reflect back on her life and my life that I was able to do that. So it took my whole life to do that. It certainly wasn't something, I mean, most of my life was very confusing because I couldn't figure out like what was going on because I didn't understand what it meant not to be loved. But it was when I was older that I thought, oh, I just felt really sad for her because I felt like she missed out on something. Whereas I knew what I was missing out on. I was missing out on a relationship that I never had. I don't think she ever reflected on that because she had too much else happening in her life. But I was much older when I finally was able to say those words. So yeah, they can take a really long time. So this is not a judgment place of, well, if you haven't said those words, gosh darn it, then you're not a real Christian. No, you've got to be a human. You're made human. And that takes time, any of these things. And you know what? We may not forgive some people. That's not going to be the thing that keeps you out of heaven either. Okay? It's just something then that you end up carrying that's hard for you. So I do think forgiveness is about being able to release the burden that Pam is talking about ourselves. Because like,
But is that really but Lori, is that really what Jesus was talking about? I don't think that's really what Jesus was talking about.
his was much bigger.
Yeah, I don't think that's what really, I don't think we're really called to forgiveness so that we can lift a burden from ourselves.
That may not be what Jesus did, but I think it does actually function as that. And all the reading I've done, Helen, would suggest that that's one of the most freeing things that people can
Oh,
do.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think that
No, I don't think
the problem with the
yeah.
problem with that,
Yeah,
that if we think about that as sort of the end, that's the end we're looking for, is that's extraordinarily selfish. Okay, we're going to forgive somebody so that we ultimately feel better. And I don't think that's what Christ is calling us to do at all. Now, I'm not saying I don't do it for the same reasons, that I might not do it for the same reasons.
right.
So I think the other thing that I was thinking about is that, you know, we're talking about like these really big sort of forgiveness topics. You know, forgive your mom.
Yeah.
Or although I don't know, the shirt's not a really big forgiveness thing, but it was a pretty big thing for Alice.
Apparently it was.
So, but I think, I don't know, I think part of the Christian journey is just remembering how to do this on a regular basis. So those little things don't become big things. And that, I mean, you know, I'll never forget, I had a priest many priests ago. You know, when we would say the peace during that part of the service, he would always say, just remember to say the peace, to exchange the peace with the person you're standing next to first, because that's the person you've probably offended the most in the last week.
Because it's like your family member.
Right. You know, your spouse, your kid, your mom, you know, depending upon the age. And so, and I've never forgotten that. So, but I do think that, and I'm hardly know how to sort of do forgiveness in the way that Christ forgave. I don't think we can ever model that. But I just don't think it's possible. There's only one human who was ever able to do that.
Exactly, exactly. But certainly it was setting an example for the fact that forgiveness is an essential part of our humanity if we do follow Christ.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at the word or give. You give away something. It means to give away.
Mhm.
And you give away your anger. You give away your resentment or your revenge. You know, it may not feel good, but what you're actually doing is you're giving away that which has angered you or the emotions that are there. And I think that's where healing does come. In other words,
Mhm.
you're letting go of this thing which is going to eat you up. And that I always try to look at the word for give.
Mhm.
You give it away. You no
With-
longer hold
with-
on to
And
it.
with no expectation that
Yes, with no
anybody's going to
expectation.
receive it or
Yes,
that people are
yes.
going to. You talked about, I do think that your example from Northern Ireland, from the conflict, the troubles.
Yeah, at a remembrance ceremony, a public one, in a town called Enniskillen, the IRA planted a bomb and blew up the people who were remembered
At the remembrance
at the
service.
remembrance service. And a father and daughter were there. Like the daughter was growing up, she was a nurse, but they were attending this service, and she died in his arms. And quite soon after that, he publicly said on TV, "I don't blame them. I forgive them." He was a Methodist, from his Christian
Did you
beliefs.
send? Because there's so much to what he said.
and
He said so much.
For
more
me,
than-
it was a turning point in the Troubles. That's you could actually hear somebody saying, "I forgive."
Oh, here it
He
is.
actually was given. He asked to talk to the IRA. The IRA met him one day, and he came out of that meeting and said, "They have no remorse, but I
Oh,
forgive
my
them."
goodness.
So
I forgive them.
I'll read you just some of his because I do think this is quite the extraordinary thing. He said, for heaven's sakes, do I want a free ebook? No, thank you. I have lost my daughter and we shall miss her, but I bear no ill will. I bear no grudge. That will not bring her back. Don't ask me, please, for a purpose. I don't have an answer. But I know there has to be a plan. If I didn't think that, I would commit suicide. It's part of a greater plan, and we shall meet again. And it says later, Gordon said his words were not intended as a theological response to his daughter's murder. He'd simply blurted them out from the depths of his heart. In the days and weeks that followed the bombing, he struggled to live up to his words. It wasn't easy, but they were something for him to hang on to, something to keep him afloat in the dark hours when grief overwhelmed him. And then he said this. He maintained they should be punished and imprisoned, but he refused to seek revenge. He said, "Those who have to account for this deed will have to face a judgment of God, which is way beyond my forgiveness. It would be wrong for me to give any impression that gunmen and bombers should be allowed to walk the streets freely. But whether or not they are judged here on earth by a court of law, I do my very best in human terms to show forgiveness. The last word rests with God." And it said, at least temporarily, his words broke the cycle of killing and revenge. The local Protestant paramilitary leadership felt so convicted by his courage that they did not retaliate.
Wow.
Very powerful story. I mean, so forgiveness has power. In our surrender, there is power, which is also
Putting human feelings on God, as we sometimes do.
well done.
I could imagine after what you just said, was Jesus saying, God, don't be so angry with them. Forgive them for what these horrible things that they're doing to me, to your son, your only son.
Yeah. I mean, he died loving us.
Mhm.
He didn't die angry and bitter. He died still experiencing the same love for humanity that he had come to express the entire time that he ministered on the earth. The thing of this, what I like about Jesus is there's consistency.
Mhm.
Like that's what you'd expect Jesus to say, hopefully in the best of all possible worlds. But it's still so extraordinary that it's worth taking the time to meditate on sort of the impossibility. So that moves us right into Romans, my favorite New Testament book. Romans 5:8 God demonstrates his own love for us in this way. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. How do you make sense of Jesus's prayer of forgiveness? And we've talked quite a bit about this. In the midst of persecution and violence, in what way does his part petition, his part petition include us? I don't know what that means. There's some type of typo there.
Just move petition.
Okay, so in what way does his petition include us? Which is interesting to think about. How does Jesus's prayer to the Father include us still today?
Yes, because we do things all the time, but.
Mhm.
I hope he keeps forgiving us because we keep doing them over.
Michael?
Micah,
Was he praying for like past, present, and future?
that's so interesting too, isn't it? That's so interesting too. Was he, because of course he always was, he is, and he will be. So when he says that prayer, you know, we're focusing on that group. And now they're telling us to think about us, but you're right. Everything in the past as well, like a kind of forgiveness that is so enormous, we rarely think about that. That's really interesting. Past, present, and future. Imagine that. That's not how my forgiveness works. I tell Alistair to wash his own shirts now. So Joyce had this to say: forgiveness is part of grief. We grieve that our mothers did not like or love us. Yes, you're right. It is part of grief. And then she also said, forgiveness is like grief. It stays with us until we can give it away and look at it differently. And there's a lot to that as well. I would think that people could track what life was like before forgiveness and after. When you have given forgiveness to someone. I mean, I guess the thing is, like, after forgiving my mother, I don't have to think that I was either a bad kid, nor do I have to think she's really a bad mother. I mean, whether she was or she wasn't, I don't have to, once again, I don't have to carry extra information or create reasons for things that I can't possibly know. Which we do all the time when we also criticize people, or when we judge people, or when we ourselves are unforgiving. There's a lot of judgment in that. And Jesus's final judgment was forgiveness for us. Crazy. So how do you make sense of his prayer? And in what day does this petition include us? Have you ever thought of yourself as being included in that prayer? That's good.
Ultimately, theologically and spiritually, that's what was happening. Physically, he was dying because of a judgment made by the Romans, encouraged by the leadership of the Jews at the time. But ultimately, from the moment Adam and Eve fell, Jesus was taking the punishment for every sin that had been committed, was being committed, and will be committed.
Yeah.
So that's for Jesus to say, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. We didn't realize that this was what it was going to cost.
I'm sorry.
We didn't realize, I'm sure that the Old Testament people didn't believe that this is what it was going to cost. We look back on it and say, this is what our sin costs. But at that moment, Father, forgive them. But I really like your answer about past, present, and future.
Yeah, it's really.
Because we are included, because we're the future.
Right. Well, and I love, that's why, as I said, I love coming to Bible study,
Yeah.
because this was not a conversation we had in the Nook.
No.
And I love that. I've learned a lot today. Leslie says this about forgiveness: it's not about forgetting. Forgiveness is letting go of it, whatever it is. Not forgetting allows us to set boundaries so we don't allow things to happen again. Forgiveness is for you to it's a big long one. To forgive takes the bitterness, anger, and depression over it, and then surrender and go into silence. It says Jesus gave only silence during his persecution. I don't know that he actually did say some things, but but like a lamb led to the slaughter, he didn't say a word. He took it all in silence, from Isaiah 53.
Yeah.
I do think that forgiveness is for other people though too. I don't think it's just for us. We can't impose whatever those results are on someone else. But I think it is very powerful to be forgiven. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but like, I didn't even know I needed to be forgiven about the shirt. Now I'm feeling very grateful that I was forgiven for something I didn't even know I need to be forgiven. That's the things done and left undone, I guess, or things thought and not sure of. Like, I was really shocked by that story. I don't even remember it. And clearly it was a big deal. Like, I know that we're thinking it's a picky little thing, but isn't that how things work in our lives? The thing we can't forget that someone said about us one time, or the thing that someone did, or like that they didn't do, that they said they were gonna do. And it kind of lives and lurks back there. You know what I'm saying, Alistair? Did you
Every
did you
day.
really forgive me? But we don't know. And we also don't know the kind of difficulty we are imposing on other people simply by being who we are.
We have quite a few more to go. Oh, we've only 10 minutes.
Okay. I do want to talk about the peace one though, because Helen brought that up, and I think
Yes.
that's an important question.
Do you want to read it?
When we are forgiven by God or forgive others who've hurt us, the goal is to find peace. And that is true. When we pass the peace at church, we are saying that we are at peace with the body of Christ. Have you ever found it difficult to pass the peace? Do you have the Colossians? Colossians 3:13. Has anybody ever found it difficult to pass the peace in church? I mean, are there people you know you don't want to shake hands with? So can you imagine people who came to church that you might think of that you wouldn't want to shake hands with? Any political thoughts in your heads? I'm just saying, like, let's get real. Let's get real. There are people that I think many of us would say, I'm not shaking that person's hand. No way. No way. You can come to my church because everybody's allowed to come in the door, but I am not going to make eye contact with you. And I am not going to shake your hand because this is my little punishment to you for being you in the world. I just want us to be realistic about that. There probably are people that it's nice to be able to say, I'm a good church person and I'll share peace with anybody. I don't know that that's true. If we are honest, picture somebody you wouldn't share the peace with right now. And if they were in church, what would it cost you to share peace? To really mean it though, not to say I have to do it, so I will. I mean, we all know that attitude too. I mean,
I guess my question is, when we're sharing the peace,
Mhm.
what exactly are we really saying? Because, okay, so we say, the peace of the Lord be with you. So what exactly does that really mean? I think a lot of us just kind of go through the motions, or we
Yes.
say good morning. Lots of times we don't even say the peace of the Lord. It's always interesting to see what
Oh,
people
interesting.
say when you share the peace,
Yeah.
because most people don't say the peace of the Lord be with you. They just say, good morning, how are you? Oh,
Right. Good to see you. It's you and it's me.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're saying, the peace of the Lord be with you, what exactly does that really mean when
That's an excellent question.
when we're saying that to another person? Not that I know the answer.
Mhm.
And there certainly are plenty of people that if they showed up at my church and, either later today or on Sunday, definitely I would not share the peace with them.
There you see, I love that. That's what I want us to make sure we're honest like that, because I think that's true for most of us, that there are people that we would think, not doing.
In fact, I'd actually like some of those people who I would not share the peace with to come to my church either tonight or on Sunday, because I would really, really, really like to talk to them. In fact, I may actually take back what I just said, because by sharing the peace with them, I would have an opportunity to talk to them. Now, the rector might get really irritated because the conversation would go on super long and I might be, thrown out. But regardless, so anyhow, I just think when we're saying the peace of the Lord, it's really meant to be something totally over and above kind of our own little petty, whatever it is we're thinking.
Well, yeah, it's one of
whether
the
or not we can do that, of course, is a whole nother issue. I can remember I was on the vestry at a parish and I ended up resigning over an issue. And I was really, really irritated with the vestry. And, there were definitely some Sundays where I didn't exchange the peace with them.
Yeah.
And they didn't exchange it with me either. So,
Right.
Neutral.
Right. Yeah. And so the reason that that's in our service, it's one of the oldest parts of our service. It is what Christians, people who followed the way, they would have greeted each other with a kiss of peace. And that is based on when Jesus appears after his resurrection, when he's in the upper room, the very first thing he says to his disciples. Now I keep saying the disciples, Jesus appears, they've run away from the cross, except for John. Only one disciple stayed. The rest of them have run like scared chickens for good reason, because they were afraid they were going to be killed, possibly too. Now they're huddled in this room, and it said for fear of the Jews, in other words, retribution, because they followed Jesus. And so when Jesus shows up again, what he could say is, and he could just like do away with all of them with one laser thing, But that isn't what he does. Or he could even say, you bunch of scared kids, what are you doing huddled in here when I've given you the strength of the Spirit? He doesn't do that. What he says is, peace be with you. It's the first thing he says. Do not be afraid. Peace be with you. It is the first greeting.
All right, then, which makes me think that the peace of the Lord is forgiveness.
Ooh, interesting.
So when he
Ooh,
appeared and says,
we keep
"Be
learning.
with you," he's letting them know
Wow.
he doesn't blame them for running away.
Wow. So it extends that saying into
So if we
this.
say, "The Lord's peace be with you," you're extending the Lord's forgiveness. Maybe
Yeah.
that's
It's very
I don't know, just
powerful.
a thought.
You just keep throwing them out there, Joan, okay?
I'm very thoughtful.
So the passage in Colossians, I think, is very applicable. I'll read around it as well from Colossians 3, verse 12. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. And this is the verse that's quoted here. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you, so that you must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony, and let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body, and be thankful.
That sets us right, doesn't it? We have several comments, so I want to make sure that we get to some of the comments as well. Leslie said, I mean, for yourself as well as the person, forgiveness is both ways, but the percentage of peace over forgiveness comes from within. The peace of the Lord be with you. It's letting go of the ego. There's an interesting thing. Joyce says, maybe saying the peace of the Lord will make us a better person. So rather than saying better person, what I say is what we might become is more of the person God made us to be. I'm always careful about the words better and worse, because we're still going to be just a person. But what I think our path of sanctification over our life is to become more and more like Jesus. So being able to say those words are words that Jesus gave us to say. So my hope is that we become conformed more and more to the likeness of Jesus in the world. And that's what it means. When we say, go in peace to love and serve the Lord is one of the dismissals. Go in peace, but yet love and serve the Lord. So Joyce said, saying over and over and over. And then Leslie said, winner, winner, chicken dinner. That's amazing, Joan.
So one of the things, and you guys might already have addressed this, I had to take a call, so it was off for
Sure.
a while. Is the difference between sort of forgiving somebody and then trusting that person again?
We didn't talk about trust. We talked about forgetting, but not trust.
Yeah, I'm not talking about forgetting. I'm
Yeah.
talking about, we're called to forgive, but we're not really called to necessarily have to, necessarily interact with that person again.
I agree.
Never necessarily have to trust that person in the way in which we
agree.
have trusted them before. And so, if somebody's stolen from you, for example, we're called to forgive them, but we certainly don't have, as a priest said to me once, that doesn't mean you have to actually give them your bank account number.
Right.
So I don't think it's just forgetting. I think it's also just realizing that, that the relationship can be fundamentally altered, even if
Yes.
we've forgiven. And then,
Yes.
and that God doesn't call us to have the same relationship after we've been truly harmed.
No, I think it's harmful to expect that.
Right. I mean,
Sure.
obviously there are lots
Yeah.
and lots of cases of that in terms of child abuse and domestic abuse and all sorts of
Right.
other examples of abuse. But even in things that are not as abusive,
Right.
I think we're called not to have to.
Even
So
yes.
to flip what Helen was saying, if you look at it from God's point of view, if God forgives us, does he trust us? You know, if we have sinned against him, he forgives us.
I think it's
the
very
difference
different
is
with
the
God.
difference is that God has the ability to do that.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
that we can compare our
No, I know, but
ability to
it's just,
forgive.
just saying that that's,
Yeah,
there is the actual additional step of reconciliation after forgiveness, which I always think reconciliation is never putting back the way it was. It becomes a different jigsaw puzzle.
it's reconstructing something
That's
new.
reconstructing something new.
Yes, it's reconciliation. It's not
Yes.
just conciliation.
Yeah.
It's a new thing.
Yeah.
And forgiveness does not mean reconciliation.
Yeah.
We have to be really careful before we confuse that it means that we somehow, because we simply don't have, we shouldn't be in relationship with people that are actually abusive towards us and that are going to continue doing that. But forgiveness can be very powerful for us, and we may not be able to get there either, in order to live our journey out as God has called us to live out our journey.
I'm sorry we didn't get going deeper.
So listen, but Pam says something really interesting. We frequently give the peace sign in church now since COVID. And she said, that just doesn't seem like the same thing. But I think we have to honor where people are also. I don't know that people have ever gotten over the business of passing germs back and forth. I'll give you a quick gloss on this. People were asking me, do you wash feet on Maundy Thursday? I said, I used to, until somebody told me they had foot fungus. And and that was before COVID. And I could not in good conscience, I just was horrified by that, because people who are elderly can actually die of fungus. And I could not, and we even got 30 towels from a linen company and used individual towels, but we weren't sterilizing everything in between each set of feet. And even before COVID, I became very aware of the fact that we have the ability. And I don't buy into the thing, well, Jesus wouldn't let that happen. They're germs. Germs exist. Jesus isn't going to prevent, we all know this, we've all been sick. What happened with COVID? So I no longer do the washing of feet anymore and then somebody said, well, people with foot problems, well, they just shouldn't have their feet washed.
Yeah.
We can't self-select people.
Leave the sinners out. Sinners cannot have their feet washed.
So so actually that is not, as much as I believe Jesus said to do that, and I feel very strongly about that, I can't do that anymore in church because I get too nervous about what it is that we may pass from one person to another unwittingly. So we have other traditions and things that we've done, but that is no longer among them. I mean, once somebody confessed foot fungus, it was really over for me. It didn't even occur to me. Just didn't even occur to me. I was like, feet are pretty safe.
That and sharing a cup.
People get to opt for that. We do not impose that on people.
Yeah, you don't impose feet washing, either.
No, that's too that is too chancy. I just don't. I can't.
Use a hose.
We'll do it outdoors.
Same
Yeah,
thing.
do it outdoors. Okay, everybody out in the backyard, we'll get the hose. Yeah, so that might profoundly change the way that looks. Just, you're pretty funny. Do you wash feet at Dwaynesburg?
No,
Why not?
it's not the tradition.
There are some very important things that I do hope, and we should have been ready to say this. Perhaps you can read Psalm 103 verses 1 through 12, because this is such a powerful psalm. And this is the psalm when people come to me for the sacramental rite of reconciliation, which used to be, it's like talking about Prince, which used to be called confession. These are the verses that I read to people after people have spoken out their sins and received absolution. I think that verse 12 of this is one of the most powerful things we ourselves can hear to understand what forgiveness is. And then this goes back to what Jan was saying about, do we forgive ourselves? Well, do we even know that God has forgiven us, much less do we forgive ourselves? Are you there?
Or even can we accept forgiveness from someone else?
Yeah. So can you read some of
Okay.
that for us?
Psalm 103.
Which we read in our Ash Wednesday service as well. So you'll hear this.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good as long as you live, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord works vindication and justice for those who are oppressed. He makes known his ways to Moses, his acts to the people of Israel. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always accuse, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is his steadfast love towards those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us.
That's the line I love. So far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. And I always tell people the east and the west can never meet. They're that far apart that they can never meet. And so God has taken those sins as far from us as is possible to take them, if we are willing to let them go. If we are willing to let them go. Anything else? So what is next week's? We were kind of, each of these has a word theme. I didn't send out.
Salvation, I think it is.
Okay, so we will be talking about that. I will send those out today. Anybody online who is not getting these, contact us in some way, call the church office. We'll make sure that we mail something today to get it to you. But if you can't print at your home, we'll make sure that you get a copy of things or can pick them up at the office in some way. So just let us know so we know to have things ready for you.
So I think it's today you will be with me in paradise. That's where salvation
Oh, I love this one then. So
You
much
wanna pray
to
us
look forward
out?
to. We just did pray. I think the Psalm,
Okay.
don't you think the Psalm
That's
was,
fine.
was a great way to pray?
Amen.
Amen. Many blessings, everybody. Thank you for joining us.